What if the thing that we've been calling community policing for the past 50 years isn't community policing? The contemporary or traditional or legacy community policing that we are practicing these days, that's not community policing. And that's been around for the past 50 years, since 1970. It's been there with some good intentions. It's a trust rebuilding tool, and it's been used with good intentions, right? But here's what happened, right? So we built a team to do community policing for us, right? We siloed it, and then we carried on as before with the rest of the service, right? And that's costing us community stress, that's costing us in call volumes, and that's costing us in money, right? So let me show you how. So here you would see on this screen that there are 10 dimensions. On the left hand side, we have the legacy community policing or traditional community policing or the contemporary community policing that we are practicing, and on the right hand side we will have the characteristics of the actual community policing, the real community policing, right? So we are going to compare that on those 10 dimensions which are in the middle, right? Based on that, if you go with the first one, which is a structure, right? So the legacy community policing, that's been siloed, and the actual community policing is integrated and service-wide, right? So legacy community policing, that's one unit, whereas the community policing, the actual community policing, that's service-wide. Let's go to the second one, which is lead. So legacy community policing is police-led, whereas the community policing, actual community policing, it's collectively led. Police is just one partner around the table, right? Whereas in this one, police design the identifies the solution, or the community provides them a list of issues, and then police looks for the solution, the police implements the solutions, and police is leading it. So the next one is a scope, right? The legacy community policing is narrow. It's focused on safety and security, whereas the actual community policing is system-wide, focused on safety and well-being. The next one is definition. So legacy community policing is neighborhood focused, whereas the actual community policing is an overarching approach. And in our case, what we do is like we call neighborhood policing as community policing, and that's the source of confusion, right? So neighborhood policing is a subset of community policing. It's not community policing. So in other words, calling neighborhood policing community policing is like calling a wheel a car, right? They're not the same thing, right? Next is intervention. So from the intervention perspective, the legacy community policing works at 2 levels, right? Whereas the actual community policing works at 4 levels, all the 4 levels of intervention. All right, so the next one is perceptions. So from the perceptions perspective, legacy community policing is considered as optional, and the actual community policing is foundational, right? So seeing it as an optional or soft policing means that the first budget line cut when things get tight is the community policing, the traditional community policing, right? But when it gets cut, the social disorder increases, call volume spikes, and then policing becomes fiscally unsustainable, right? So the actual community policing, which is foundational, it means it's not optional, and it's what holds the system together, right? Legacy community policing is optional, and the actual community policing is foundational, as you can see here. So the next one is stakeholders. So most of the stakeholders in the in the traditional or legacy community policing are local service agencies and community centers, etc. Whereas in actual community policing, most of stakeholders are both at the local level and then stakeholders at the system level as well, right? So this is police-led and very local, whereas it's a collectively led, working cross-sector, bringing social services, health, schools, housing, all those different levels of government together to address the issue. The next one is effect, right? So effect of the legacy community policing is that it divides the police service into the community policing and the frontline policing, and those two silos working separately, and no formal mechanisms to interact and coordinate, right? Whereas the actual community policing, it bridges the divide within the police services, the front line and the community police that work together to address the root causes, as well as effectively responding to emergency situations. So the traditional community policing divides the specialized units from the frontline policing, whereas in the actual community policing, it bridges the divide, right? The next one is the last one, which is the bottom line. And the bottom line is that what we have been calling community policing all along, right, since the 1970s, is actually neighborhood policing, right? It's valuable, but it's narrow, right? Actual community policing, on the other hand, is an approach that holds everything together. So community safety and well-being is how we build it. So the question is not whether we can define it. The question is whether we are ready to implement community policing the way it should be.